the evening of October 26, 2009, began like countless other evenings for 19-year-old university student Miyako Hiraoka. At the time, she was studying at a university in Shimane Prefecture, a largely rural region of western Japan known for its quiet towns, mountains, and coastal scenery. Like many students living away from home for the first time, Miyako balanced her studies with a part-time job. She was building a future, attending classes, making plans, and living the ordinary life of a young woman at the beginning of adulthood. Nothing about that day suggested it would become one of the most infamous unsolved murder cases in modern Japanese history. After finishing work that evening, Miyako began the trip back toward her residence. It was a route she had traveled before. Friends, family members, and investigators would later focus intensely on those final known moments because they marked the last time anyone could reliably place her movements. Then she disappeared. At first, there was confusion. Students occasionally stayed out later than expected. Phones could be forgotten. Plans could change. But as hours passed without contact, concern grew. When she failed to return and could not be reached, family members and friends realized something was seriously wrong. A missing person investigation began. Police attempted to reconstruct her final hours. Detectives examined where she had worked, who had seen her, and what route she likely took after leaving. Investigators sought surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, and followed every lead they could find. The challenge was immediate. There was no obvious explanation for her disappearance. She had not informed anyone that she planned to travel elsewhere. There was no indication she intended to vanish voluntarily. Everything suggested that her disappearance had been sudden and unexpected. As days passed, public concern increased. News outlets began reporting on the missing student. Appeals were made for information. Her photograph appeared in newspapers and broadcasts. Volunteers and investigators searched for clues. Yet there was no sign of Miyako. Then the case took a tragic turn. Weeks later, human remains were discovered in a mountainous area of Hiroshima Prefecture, some distance from where she had disappeared. Investigators were called to the scene. The discovery immediately raised fears. Forensic examinations eventually confirmed the remains belonged to Miyako Hiraoka. The missing person case had become a murder investigation. The news devastated her family and shocked the public. The hope that she might be found alive vanished instantly. In its place came grief, anger, and a desperate need for answers. Investigators now faced an even more difficult task. Not only did they need to determine who had taken Miyako's life, but they also had to reconstruct events that had occurred weeks earlier with very little evidence available. Police from multiple jurisdictions became involved. Detectives examined every possible connection. They studied her personal life, her university activities, her workplace, and her social relationships. Individuals who had interacted with her were interviewed. Vehicles and travel routes were analyzed. Thousands of investigative hours were invested in the case. Despite these efforts, progress was painfully slow. No suspect was identified. No arrest was made. The case began to grow cold. As months became years, public attention slowly faded, but investigators continued working. The murder remained open. Detectives revisited evidence, reviewed statements, and re-examined leads. For Miyako's family, every passing year deepened the pain. The murder had taken their daughter, but uncertainty had taken something else as well. Without knowing who committed the crime or why, there could be no sense of closure. The case became one of Japan's most troubling unsolved mysteries. Then, unexpectedly, a development emerged from a completely different direction. Shortly after Miyako's remains were discovered in 2009, a man named Yoshiharu Yano died in a traffic accident. At the time, his death attracted no special attention in relation to the murder investigation. He was not publicly known as a suspect. His name was not widely associated with the case. Years passed. Then investigators examining materials connected to Yano made a disturbing discovery. Digital storage devices contained photographs. The images shocked investigators. According to police findings, the photographs showed Miyako's body after her death. The significance of the discovery was enormous. Photographs of that nature would have been extremely difficult for an uninvolved person to possess. Investigators believed the images directly connected Yano to the crime. Suddenly, a case that had resisted solution for years began moving toward an answer. Detectives carefully analyzed the digital evidence. Every file had to be examined. Dates were reviewed. Locations were studied. Forensic specialists evaluated the photographs and their significance. Investigators compared the evidence against known facts from the original investigation. The more they analyzed the material, the stronger the connection became. Authorities eventually concluded that Yano had been responsible for Miyako's murder. The announcement came years after both the crime and the suspect's death. It was a deeply unusual outcome. In most murder investigations, authorities identify a suspect first and then attempt to gather evidence. In this case, critical evidence emerged only after the suspected perpetrator had already died. Because Yano was deceased, a criminal trial could never occur. There would be no courtroom testimony, no cross-examinations, no confession, no sentencing. Many questions would remain unanswered forever. Investigators could establish what they believed had happened, but they could never question the suspect about his motives or actions. For Miyako's family, the development brought mixed emotions. The identity of the person responsible had finally been determined, ending years of uncertainty. Yet justice, in the traditional legal sense, was impossible. The suspect could never stand before a court. He could never be punished. He could never explain why the crime had occurred. The case, nevertheless, represented a remarkable investigative achievement. Years after the murder, evidence hidden on digital devices ultimately revealed information that had escaped detection during the original investigation. The discovery demonstrated how technological evidence can sometimes survive long after other clues have disappeared. Today, the murder of Miyako Hiraoka remains remembered not only because of its tragic circumstances, but also because of the extraordinary path investigators followed to solve it. A young university student vanished during what should have been an ordinary journey home. A massive investigation followed. Years passed without answers. Then evidence discovered after the death of the suspected killer transformed an unsolved mystery into a case investigators believed they had finally explained. The story remains one of the most unusual homicide investigations in modern Japan, a case where the truth emerged slowly, piece by piece, long after hope of solving the mystery had nearly faded.